So thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm Heather Salmon, and this is so exciting to be asked to present here on behalf of the African American and Maui Association. And I like what Ian said. It's always Black history for us. We're always learning about our history, and it's so important that we continue to reflect on where we've come from and what our accomplishments are, and continue the work of our ancestors. And I'm very privileged to come from extraordinary people, both my father and my mother. I mean, the mother just spoke at 5 Black History events last month, and she's a whole nother topic that's very legendary. But tonight I'm going to be talking about the men in my life, my family, and both my father and my uncle are deceased, and they both have had extraordinary lives. My father was born in Toronto in 1923. Went on to become, he was actually an orphan. He was orphaned at 6 years old. His father, so my family comes from Jamaica, and I believe that my father's father and lineage were Maroons, and the Maroons were the slaves that freed themselves. And they gave the British such a hard time that the British deported a bunch of them to Nova Scotia and a bunch of them back to Africa, to Sierra Leone. But when the abolition of slavery happened in Jamaica, my grandfather at the turn of the century, around the end of the 1800s and 1900, he was very romantic, and he went back to Africa to fight for the British Army, actually, in the Boer War. And he ended up immigrating from Jamaica to Toronto. And so did my grandmother in 1911, and my grandmother was pregnant with my eldest aunt. And my grandfather didn't join her for 3 years later. And then they had a total of 6 children, and my father was the youngest of the children. And by the time my father was 6, both his parents had passed. His father we're not sure, there was all kinds of things happening back then. So, but they say my grandmother died she pined away. After my grandfather passed, that she died a couple years later, pretty quickly. So this left my dad an orphan. That's in 1930, Looking back in 1929, he was the youngest of 6 children, orphan, family like almost dead on the street. My grandmother's sister who was in her 50s and childless, ended up taking care of them. And my dad had a dream. My aunts would say, from 3 years old, they'd ask him, what's he going to do? He said, I'm going to be a doctor. And then there was very few models he had for that, but he was so clear in what he wanted and who he was and what he was to become, and he was so charismatic. There's a few pictures here. This is my uncle, so this is my uncle's side. I have actually a few more pictures of my uncle, and this is my mother's brother, who I'll talk about after my father. And then my dad is in there too. So my father was such a humble person that I remember my eldest cousin saying when my dad passed that she never knew he was Canada's first Black surgeon. She never knew that he was the first Black man to hold the position of chief of staff of surgery in Canada. She had no idea. She was like in her 40s, and like he was such a humble and charismatic man that he wasn't boastful at all. He got through, with his charisma, really won the hearts and minds of everyone around him. The nurses loved him, and to be a surgeon and have nurses love you is like quite a thing, because surgeons can be known to be kind of ornery and cranky or whatever, bossy. But he wasn't that at all. So I thought I would just read my dad's bio and then share a few more stories. And then share about my uncle as well, who just passed. My dad passed in 2005 on September 20th. So Dr. John Douglas Roy Graham Salmon was a kind and wonderful person who had to struggle for everything he achieved. His family, his friends say. Salmon, who died Wednesday, September 21st, 2005, wasn't only the first black surgeon in Canada. He was an accomplished pianist, scholar, athlete, and sculptor as well. From the moment I met him, I knew he was a person I could truly respect, and I never tried to vary from that thinking. That was what my mom said. My mother, his wife, former Metro Toronto councillor and North York councillor, said of her partner of 50 years. He was always warm and loving to all the family. He had a wonderful way of reaching out to people. He was loved by his patients and colleagues alike. He was truly a role model and inspiration. His lifelong friend, lawyer Leonard Braithwaite, Canada's first black MPP, called Salmon kind and capable. This great land of ours is better because of him, Braithwaite said of the man he grew up with near Kensington Market in Toronto. Braithwaite said that in those days, before World War II, black families were few and far between in Toronto. And Salmon's life was a story of triumph over adversity. Born to Jamaican immigrants, Eugenie, a Black Cross Marcus Garvey nurse, my grandmother, and Robert, a veteran of the Boer War, Douglas was the youngest of 6 children. They became orphaned during the Great Depression when Douglas was 6. Their mother's sister, Margaret Brown, Aunt Meg, a childless widow in her 50s, stepped in to raise all 6 of them. Salmon was an independent and strong-willed child even then. His late sister, Stavella, used to recall that even from a very young age, her baby brother always insisted, quote, "I'm going to be a doctor." Young Douglas Salmon would let nothing stand in his way, according to the family history. Always resourceful and self-motivated, he would go around the neighborhood lighting furnaces for a penny, as well as work 3 paper routes so he, too, could contribute to the family. In the 1940s, Douglas Salmon and his orchestra, here's an orchestra, you see a picture of him. He had the Doug Salmon Band. He and his orchestra entertained dances and parties and lodges in and around Toronto. Not escaping the realities of racism of the day, Salmon became a protest leader on the Race Discrimination Committee in 1942, which battled for the rights of blacks to enter Toronto's Palais Royal to see jazz greats such as Duke Ellington. The protest came after he and a group of friends were denied admission to the Palais Royal to hear Father Hines play piano. In 1992 interview with the Toronto Star, Salmon said, while Canada didn't have segregation in those days, blacks did find themselves shut out of places. You didn't see blacks as salesperson. As far as education was concerned, you saw few blacks introduced to university. And actually, my aunt said, his eldest sister would tell me all the time when I was a child that in Toronto, even the major stores, like we had Hudson's Bay Company, and it would say no blacks, Jews, or dogs allowed, or on the beaches. I mean, this was definitely happening in Toronto at that time. In 1951, he obtained his honors degree in physiology and biochemistry from the University of Toronto. And in 1955, his medical degree, graduating president of his second-year medical class. Salmon received scholarships from the American Jesse Smith Noyes Foundation and interned at Toronto Western Hospital In 1954, his sister Bee introduced him to Beverly Bell, my mom, a young Victorian order nurse. They were married in '56 and immediately moved to Detroit. Although he was offered a thriving practice in Detroit, the couple chose to return to Toronto and start a family. They had 4 children, Doug Jr., Warren, Heather, and Leslie, my little sister. In 1967, Salmon joined Scarborough Centenary Hospital's general surgical staff. He was the busiest surgeon there for many years, which his colleagues attributed not only to his superior skills and training, but also to his work ethic, conscientious patient care, disciplined lifestyle, and great personality. He was known for his courage, humility, and compassion, and he became one of the first surgeons in Canada to treat the morbidly obese with the breakthrough gastric bypass surgery. Salmon became president of Centenary's medical staff and was later appointed chief of surgery, the first black person to hold such positions in Canada. After retiring from the Centenary Hospital in 1995, he joined the Rudd Clinic in Toronto. He retired from practice in 1997, and Salmon was a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons and had a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. He, in recognition of his outstanding stature and service to the community, he was awarded the Canadian Black Achievement Award for medicine. In tribute to our father, we've established the John Douglas Roy Graham Salmon Award for Black medical students, and a medical student is awarded this every year, administered through the University of Toronto. Yeah. So it's, my dad was one of those tall, people used to think he was like a Sidney Poitier when he was a kid. He was so, there he is, so gorgeous, that's his dad, and handsome. They said they actually tried to recruit him to be part of the Little Rascals. And his siblings said, no, you're not taking him anywhere. So, this is my mother and her family. But the little one was my uncle that I'm going to talk about next, my Uncle David. So my Uncle David is is like 20 years younger than my dad was born in 23. My uncle was born in 44, so 30 years younger. And when my mother got married to my dad, her brother was significantly younger than her. But my mother's father had passed when my uncle was 9, and he was, really the baby of the family. My mom likes to tell a story saying, my grandmother gave birth to him when she was 45 years old, and they were all so embarrassed. But he came out on Easter morning, and so, they were like their little Easter present, and they were like their little doll. They were like all 20 by that time, and they had this little baby. So my mother was a nurse, and she said that when she was in nursing school, he was like 5 years old or something, and he ended up in the hospital, and she was in nursing school, and she was in the hospital. He had to go to the hospital, and she said she snuggled up into bed with him, and there was this the head nurse came in and threw a complete conniption at her, saying, "What are you doing in bed with this child?" And she's like, "That's my little brother. Get out of here." So they loved and adored my uncle, and my uncle tells that he just passed in January, and he went rather quickly and suddenly at the age of 72. And my cousin was reminiscing, and that in the past few months, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and went down really quickly, but I guess he had spent time reflecting on his life, and he was so emotional when it came to talking about my father, because my mother's family is mixed family, and her father was Jamaican, and her mother was half Irish and half Scottish. And talk about interesting, my grandmother was pretty gutsy in the 20s, having interracial marriage, but she did, and she was very strong Irish Scottish woman who loves skating and things. So yeah, so that side of the family, when my grandfather had died when he was 9 years old, it left a huge hole in his heart, and he was very emotional and felt very lonely and alone. But then my dad came along, and with my mom, when he was a teenager, and he was just in such awe of what my father had accomplished, and he was this sculptor and pianist and surgeon and black, and wow. So that really gave him, my dad was his strength to pull off and to really go through what he went through and accomplished. And now I'm going to read from my uncle's bio. Okay. So David V.J. Bell, born April 14th, 1944, and raised in Toronto, Professor Bell was an Ontario scholar who won the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship after attending Glendon College. He went on to receive his PhD in political science from Harvard University. Bell taught at Michigan State University and then returned to Canada in 1971 to teach at York University. There he served as Dean of Graduate Studies and later Dean of the Faculty of Environmental Studies. An academic and author, he wrote several books and countless articles. Few people are aware that Bell, in addition to being a professor and a dean, was also the founder of York University's women's soccer program in 1984 and is head coach until 1997. That's because my cousin, his daughter, he didn't like the coaching, so he's like, I'm going to be a coach. He's like my dad, Mr. Renaissance guy. He guided the team to Ontario Women's Intercollegiate Athletic Association. Silver medal in 1998 and bronze medal in 1990. Bell was an ardently proud Canadian. He was also an accomplished musician who studied with Ray Brown at Oscar Peterson's Advanced School of Contemporary Music. He was an active bassist for both small jazz ensembles as well as big bands and continued to play even in his retirement. Colleagues at York University described Bell as being a thoughtful and caring man who was deeply concerned about the environment, and his concern underscored much of his career. His work and advocacy impacted policymakers, educators, youth across the globe, and his contributions to sustainability and education continue to benefit future generations. His altruism was recognized with many awards over his lifetime. Most notably, Bell was the recipient of the 2014 Canadian Network for Environmental Education and Communication Award, the Green Toronto Award for Leadership and Sustainability. In 2016, he received the Harry Jerome Award, the Clean 50 Award, and the Jackie Robinson Fortitude Award. After retiring from York University at 61, Bell joked in an article from the Globe and Mail that retirement meant that he could reduce his work hours in the week to half, to just 48 hours a week. As a chair of the Board of Learning for a Sustainable Future for the past 11 years, Bell showed no signs of slowing down in retirement as he worked tirelessly, crisscrossing the planet to talk with politicians, policymakers, and educators about the importance of sustainability. For the last 25 years or so, I have focused my thinking and my energy on what I regard as the greatest challenge facing all of the world's people, whatever their race, skin color, nationality, or ethnic origin. The challenge of sustainability, Bell said, in a story published at Y File in May of 2016. The current path of global development appears to be taking us towards environmental and social disaster. The trajectory that we are on is unsustainable. We need to green our economy, reduce social inequity, tackle diversity and inclusion, and provide food and water, energy and housing, clean air for more than 9 billion people. To do this, we humans must learn to live more sustainably on this planet. To achieve this goal, Bell focused his knowledge, passion, and purpose squarely on the role of education in helping society learn its way to a more sustainable future. While the planet's situation is dire, Bell said that he could see the start of green shoots sprouting in what he described as the early signs of a culture shift towards sustainability, something he described as global chorus of hope. The current path of global development appears to be taking us towards environmental and social disaster. The trajectory we are on is unsustainable. We need to green our economy, reduce social inequity, tackle diversity and inclusion, and provide food and water, energy, clean air for more than 9 billion people. Bell's commitment to sustainability was underpinned by the daily inspiration received from Karen, his wife of 50 years, his 2 children, my cousins, Kristen and Jason, their spouses, and his grandchildren. He was a real family man. In addition to his work with the Learning for a Sustainable Future, he was also a member of the National Roundtable on the Environment and Economy, and he was the chair of the board of directors of Downsview Park. He served as a consultant to private and public sectors, advising several universities and governments, including Jamaica, Canada, China. And that's my uncle. So his message continues to resound as important and relevant, and you know, for me, what I love most about them was both of them. It's like at family gatherings, they're not talking shop, they're talking kids and family and music and boxing, and they're like regular guys. So I feel very, very honored and privileged to share their stories here and let their legacy live on and through me and my family and our beloveds and our community. So I just want to see if you have anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments. Yes.
You know, I teach at here at the college, and just yesterday, in fact, I teach two cultural literacy classes, and on this one class, it's predominantly Asians, predominantly Japanese, and I always ask students, have you ever had any Black, African descent, African American, just whatever person in your life? And the answer is always no. And I said, well, what do you know about people who look like me? And they get all of their information from the media, television, or films. And so we had a really good discussion. And so, of course, when you talk to a number of them, they are afraid of people that look like us. And so as I listen to what you're saying about your father and your uncle, I'm so being impressed. That's not the word. I'm just so happy that you are here to represent them. And what I'd like to offer, as I know Marilyn, you work at the school over there, and all, this is a program that should be around in the schools because kids have no idea.
Yeah.
My granddaughter goes to Kalama Intermediate School, and right now we're helping her because their image, who they are emulating, are gang members.
Right.
Some of the little boys, they think they're really tough, they wear red, some of them wear blue, and I think, are you out of your mind? But this is who they have to emulate because they look at some of the television programs and some of the rap music, and they have no idea, it's being pushed for sure, and they have no idea of contributions, and it's so vitally important and necessary. Somewhere recently, somebody was saying that if you look and all you see in reference to an airplane negatively portrayed. That's the image you get. And this around the world is the image that people have of blacks, African descent people, African Americans, people from Canada. And so I just want to thank you, and I hope we get to share this more, because it's so vitally important, so vitally necessary. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it is absolutely vitally important. And you know, even me being as Jamaican descent, people are like, well, you don't sing reggae? You're not, you're not, you're not, you know, a Rastafarian. They don't understand how diverse we are within our community. And you go to Jamaica, Rastafarians are like 3% of the population. You know, so yeah, I do believe these stories, and this is something as we, as a black woman, walk through in the life and recognize that people have all these ideas and expectations and of who I am and how I should be and what my potential is. So this has given me great strength, and also, you know, I take that dose of humility and grace from my family to recognize that people are, you know, don't know, they're ignorant. Basically, it's ignorance. So I can be sometimes very frustrating, but I try to take that humility pill and patience pill and rise to the occasion and show them something more beautiful.
Yes,
And
yes. And especially here in Hawaii,
yeah.
because, you know, we don't have the numbers to have, so we can have those experiences.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. This, you know, like I said, when I first heard about it on Facebook, I knew that this needed to be shared. And I too, like, when I think this should be to a more broader audience, this, you know, I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm saying, this needs to be all over, you know, and I'm sitting here and I'm saying, they need to know about this. We have Maui Resident right here, who comes from good stuff, who is not one of those round the way girls or women of what they do, you know, who have broken through the barriers, you know. Same thing with your father and with your uncle, you know. Myself, my father is from Barbados, you know, and although I'm a New Yorker, you know, my mom is from the South, but, you know, my father's side is from the islands too, you know, and I think that this is needed here today and every day. I think we should continue to show this here around. This is good every day, every month, you know, until we get the message out. I also would like you to share about some of the adversities when you mentioned that your father was orphaned. And so as a small boy, and of course some of his cells are within the DNA, you know, his rise over the adversity, his triumph, and what he had to do to get to where he was at. Of course, he no doubt suffered discrimination, things like that. I'd like you to share some of that and your relationship with your father.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, my father he didn't really talk about his challenges as a child. He talked about how he rose through it. You know, he didn't really dwell on, he wasn't in a pity party, he wasn't looking for sympathy. He was looking for action and, okay, let's break through this, my mother ended up being the human rights commissioner and activist and civil rights leader. And I mean, I can remember, I know that when they moved to the States, because my mother is mixed, and so she could, what we call pass. She's very light-skinned, so she could pass for white. And she, so when they moved to Detroit, and she was working in the hood, you know, she had a lot of challenges and issues. And I know that when even crossing the border, they would be like, well, what are you doing with this black man? And I remember us going to a hotel, even in Canada, when I was a small child, when I was probably like 10 or so. and we had a reservation in this hotel, and our family showed up at the front desk, and all of a sudden, no, we don't have a reservation for you. And they didn't want to meet with my mother. Anyways, we got our way through that, but you know, my mother became a champion in our community for anybody receiving discrimination, women, children, invisible minorities, and the disabled. She was a real champion for many years, and still is now. There's a carding issue in Toronto that she's working on. So definitely, you know, my dad somehow he had this gift of turning lemons into lemonade. Whether he internalized some of it, I mean, he did end up with Alzheimer's, so perhaps on some level he you know, internalized some of it, and he went back to a very sweet and innocent and being cared for time at the end of his life. It was really beautiful in a lot of ways, because he was, you know, we were all able to really love him up and care for him in a way that he had been so strong his whole life that he never showed that kind of side of him that needed that kind of support. So yeah, but he had some way, you know, with a smile on his face, $1 million smile, that he could win the hearts and minds of people around him and just continue to break through and, you know, become the leader of a band, to become the president of his medical class, to become the president of the, and just never not worry about what people were thinking about him. He was very spiritual, very religious. He'd be praying, and he'd pray over all his patients. I know his faith gave him a lot of strength, and that's one thing he did. Before every surgery, he'd pray over his patients, and he allowed Spirit to take care of what needed to be taken care of while he kept on his path. That's what I can say about him. Hey, any other questions or comments? Yeah.
You know, one of the things I thought of as you was reading was the Webster Dictionary. You know, where if you go in the book and you look up Ford or MacArthur or somebody, they have his picture there with all his information, you know. And it's like, wow, that's the definition of a man, a black man, you know. Encyclopedia or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At my uncle's funeral, you know, one of his colleagues said the thing about your uncle, what he would say is you need to leave your legacy.
Yes.
You need to leave a legacy. So who are you? What are you about? What are you doing? Make your time worthwhile here and do it well. Focus on what you're here to focus on. Leave your legacy. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Can you talk about the musical side of your uncle, of both men, and how that was with them in the jazz era in the clubs, and how they were with the jazz community? Can you share some of that?
Sure. My uncle, you know, played bass until the week just before he passed, and was very into music the whole time. My father, though, once he had us, like, you know, he had his Doug Salmon band in the 40s and 50s, and he was a sculptor. But once he had a family, that kind of, he still played piano in the house, and he still listened to a little bit of music, but he wanted us to really focus on academics. So he, while most of us studied music and dance, he really wanted us, you know, ended up going to business school, so I have a degree in commerce and economics, and he was like, he was out of his sense of wanting to make sure that we were okay and be able to sustain ourselves. he really didn't want us to enter into the arts, but what did I do? I entered into the arts. He finally accepted that that was my path. So he was okay with that. But he loved Oscar Peterson. They were my dad, my mom were personal friends with them. They also, when they were living in Detroit, they would go to see Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and were very active and influent in the community, and had their, and then they love music. I mean, we have other family members, extended family, who are jazz musicians and artists. So they continue to. He loved Oscar Peterson and Louis Armstrong and all those guys. So the day he passed. So it's wonderful. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Did you have a question?
No, I just asked him. I was wondering which one was your dad. I
Oh,
apologize for
he's
this.
right there. You see that handsome dude right there? And that's my uncle. And that's my mother. And this is her Uncle David on her lap. He was much younger than the rest of them. And that's my uncle. Yeah.
Very educational and heartwarming.
Yeah, and I think this is such a great time to bring these stories forward, because as we're going through all this challenges and triumph, it's a time to find some wind beneath our wings, and it's time to reach back and remember and build on the strength of our ancestors,
Yes.
and to know that we can overcome, we can rise through whatever we're being faced with now, and to keep the hope, and to keep your eye on the prize, and to continue to fan that flame. It's not time for it to give up or have a pity party. I don't believe so. So the more positive energy we can generate right now, the more hope and inspiration we can offer. We all have our own unique gifts and ways of sharing and things that we're supposed to be doing, and to really enjoy that, our own diversity within our community and what everyone has to offer, and to encourage that, and to see how we can recreate. We're creating a new culture, a new way of being, and that's more. And it's beautiful being here in Hawaii, where it's the most diverse state in occupied territory in the States. So, I mean, I would love to see even more like cultural events and celebrations where we can really appreciate our diversity and find our unity in our diversity. Because there's so many ways we each do different things, but we're doing kind of cultivating the same sense of unity and love and appreciation for life in so many different ways. Yeah. Thank you guys.
This is nice and intimate.
Would you take a moment and tell us who is who in the pictures?
Oh, that's my little sister, my Uncle David and his kids. This is my Uncle David. My Uncle David, he was so handsome when he was younger. My brother he was my brother's godfather, and my brother has a story. This is my extended family, so we're very diverse in our family. So my mother's siblings and my cousins, I've got cousins who are blonde hair and blue-eyed, and cousins who are very dark, because we're all so diverse. But one story I'll share is my uncle, who was very suave, I guess, when he was younger. When my brother was in college, university, he said he made his way through the window at the frat house and showed up on his couch like this. And then he said, "Hey, Doug, come with me." And he had a Corvette, a Corvette outside, and took him into the hills. There he was going to school. And his friends were like, "Whoa, who's that?" And so he was very suave, and my dad was a little more more, yeah, he was very suave, but he was very kind of understated.
Now,
Besides my dad, yeah.
Could your dad share any of his stories of it during his surgeries? There's a picture of him where he's showing up scrubbing with his nurse. Did he share any of those stories of racism with the patients or things of that sort that you know of?
He didn't. I used to work for my dad had me working as his medical secretary from the time I was like 11 years old. Seriously. He's like, this is my dictation, you need to type it up. You're coming to work in my office. I was like 12 years old, 11 years old. I'm like, aren't I too young to do this? No, just do this. So he was my dad would be like that. I would be like 7 years old. You're going to change the tire. You're going to change the tire. I'm like 7 years old. But it's funny. I'm sure there were lots of stories, but I didn't hear about them. In his office where I did work in the summers, his patients loved him. They really loved him, and they bring their friends and family, and really trusted him. But I am sure there are stories I don't know, I haven't heard about. He never dwelled on them. He didn't really share them. Maybe my mother knows some of them. I'm sure she does. But yeah, he was like such a positive person and wanted to, yeah. My mom kind of handled all the dirty work, and he was like Mr. Suave. I mean, he handled some dirty work too, but he never had any lawsuits or anything like that from discrimination.
Is that your family?
Yeah, that's my mother and her siblings. So their father was Jamaican and their mother was Irish Scottish. And that's my aunt, that's my uncle and his wife. So my uncle and his wife.
Did he go to Harvard?
Yeah, he's a Harvard PhD. Yeah, and that's my cousins, and that's my little sister in the middle with my uncle and their family. So, yeah.
Heather, you mentioned to me that your mother is coming out here. Have you planned a talk with your mother out here so that if those in the audience or other people want to hear some more of the history of your family and now from your mother, have you planned on having a date or something like that?
I haven't planned that yet, and I actually don't know when my mother's in Bali right now with my sister at the Bali Spirit Festival, because my sister's presenting her Afro Flow Yoga there. And then she's going to China, and she's like, I'm coming to visit you on my way back. I'm like, when are you coming, Mom? Like, I think she's coming April 2nd, but I don't even have an exact date. So maybe once I get her dates, I'm not sure how long she's going to be here for, because she needs to go to some 100th birthday in New York of a family member. So
I'd like to meet her.
yeah, definitely. We can. I'll find out once I find out when she's coming. We'd love to arrange something, at least a lunch or something. Yeah, for sure. She can. She's got some interesting. My mother's got stories, and my mother has strategies. You know, especially with a lot of things that we're facing, whether it be discrimination or trying to break through old paradigm thinking, policies. She was a politician and a human rights commissioner, and so she's a good person to talk to about how to bring about change in a way that's. She's never like the kind of activist that is really blaming and shaming people. You know, she's not like, she didn't play the ugly politician slandering people or whatever, but she is able to really focus on whatever needs to be focused on and go in there and excavate and help to bring about new policy in a way that's kind of people feel respect. I mean, there's a lot of things that are changing, but we can do it through. And I think she reminds me of the way aloha, what aloha really means. Like I don't think it's a Hawaiian way to be. Inclusivity is important in the spirit of aloha. My understanding is, and so how can we find ways of being we have common values. So when we find our common ground, how can you recognize maybe this part isn't serving me or that part isn't serving this group, and how can we affect change that serves the whole more? So it's really, she's really dynamic that way, able to do that. Strong.
So did you grow up in Canada or the United States or both places?
I grew up in Toronto.
Toronto.
So I was born and raised in Toronto, and I left there in '98, in my mid-30s, to move to California and became an actress, and I was working for the NBA too. So before I came to California, I was kind of working cross-border for the National Basketball Association as an international events producer. And then they wanted me to be like an on-air personality. And I was like, maybe I'll be like a Diane Sawyer. And then I ended up getting an agent. And she's like, I became a successful actress. But I was always interested in healing, social justice, and the performing arts, and seeing how I could create more healing in the performing arts in what I do. So, that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Do you live here?
Yes, I live here in Puelo, Maui, out in the jungle. Yes, my beloved over here, Donnie. Okay.
Any other questions?
I would love to meet your mom.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm sure. Let's have a lunch date or do something or do another one. Yeah, she's amazing now. She's 87 and still she's still working. She's still consulting the police, around race relations. And she's just receiving the Order of Ontario Award, and she's been received all kinds of awards for her and the Martin Luther King Award for her lifetime achievements. So she's amazing.
She's got quite the flight schedule too.
A flight schedule?
And she's
Yeah, now she's flying around. She's going to Bali and China and here and
Hong Kong, back to Bali, back to Hong Kong, into Hawaii,
yeah, she's doing well. She's strong.
Any other questions for Heather? Well, we thank Heather for coming out and sharing her story with her father, who's the first black surgeon of Canada, and her uncle, Dr. David Bell, also great men, and to have our own beloved Heather here with us in Maui. Let's thank Heather.
Okay, bye out there, people in Facebook land. Thank you for tuning in. This will be on YouTube too.